Hey, welcome again to another episode of Leaders and Friends. I'm joined today by Lorenzo Simonelli. Lorenzo was my colleague for many years at GE. He's the classic case of somebody that you saw when he was in his 20s who had immense talent and capability that was willing and able to traverse multiple businesses in different regions of the world and do every job with excellence. He's been the CEO of Baker Hughes for about the last decade almost. And, is one of the world's experts on the energy sector, leadership, globalization. So Lorenzo, welcome. It's great to see you again from sunny Houston, and it's great to be with you. Welcome.
Jeff, thank you very much, and thanks for the kind words. And it's great to be with you. So, looking forward to the discussion.
Hey, thanks, Lorenzo. So maybe just start with what's topical to everybody, and that's kind of the world of energy and energy transition. And you sit in kind of, let's say, traditional technologies, but have to look across the world at where the changes are going to be, and just give me a sense for the sector and how you view the current and the future.
Definitely. And I think that we are at a very interesting time in the energy sector. And a lot has been said about the energy transition, about climate change, about the impact of the environment, how we should move towards renewables. And I think what's becoming clear to everybody is there is an abundant need for energy expansion. And at the heart of it, that means we've got to tackle emissions versus trying to go against fuel types. So at the moment, the focus has to be on how do we meet the demand that's out there from the growing population and also from the developing world, which is different than where the energy resides and the energy has been consumed in the past. And so at the core of what we do as Baker Hughes is really look to help energy expansion and actually reducing emissions across all fuel types. So natural gas is our friend. It is a lower emissions fuel source, and it should be utilized. And in fact, we're seeing growing demand going forward. Renewables will definitely continue to grow and have a role to play, as will hydrogen, as will also nuclear, as will geothermal, and oil will continue to play a role. The important thing is that we continue to look at how we abate and reduce the emissions that ultimately impact the climate change. And I think there's an understanding about the impact environmentally of climate change. Now we've got to balance the aspect of the desire to move away from fossil fuels with the reality that we need energy. And so we've got to focus on reducing the emissions versus trying to eliminate fuel sources.
Lorenzo, how do you view, the ability to impact policy and just, like I look at something like banning natural gas exports as being just stupid, and I say that not, people can disagree about stuff, but it actually makes the world dirtier, not cleaner. And so in a world where those things can happen, how does a CEO kind of try to at least get some intelligence into the policymaking process?
Jeff, I think you're an expert at this because you did it for so many years. And at the end, it's true. What you see externally sometimes and what you hear being said are things that are ludicrous. And the aspect of banning natural gas or eliminating exports is actually detrimental to the price of energy and also to the well-being of the population at large. The best way is by approaching it from a pragmatic standpoint and making sure your voice is heard. There are people that understand the reality, and even though they may not say it publicly, at the end, in the offices that matter, they listen to you. And so you've got to be, as a CEO, committed to what you believe in and what's right, and be vocal and on the hill, be out there in the organizations. And it's an ecosystem that you have to participate in. And I look at the various government meetings I have. I look at the various associations that we participate in. And it's by being a participant and being pragmatic and being vocal that ultimately you can help drive some common sense. It's not easy, and it takes a effort of mobilizing people around you. I am an optimist that common sense prevails in the end, but as I heard yesterday from one of the government officials, sometimes people need to see some pain before they realize what common sense is. And
Mm.
unfortunately, when we look at the energy sector, that's what we're seeing, and we have seen in some of the pricing of energy over the course of the last few years, given some of the global events that have happened.
Yeah, no, we sit in a country that's running out of electricity, and I don't know how to stop it. If you had one bet to make in the energy transition that wasn't kind of where Baker Hughes is today, what would it be?
I think over the course of the next 2 decades, hydrogen will play a role, and also new technologies around direct air capture will help make sure that we can have cleaner energy for the world. And those are two areas that we're placing significant investment in and also see them as key technologies for the future.
Lorenzo, I had you in my class at Stanford a couple years ago, and the next class, we were talking about your lecture, and people said like, this guy should be Secretary of State. He knows so much about the world. So, give us a few thoughts on how you see globalization, what parts of the world interest you, and you have such a broad purview. What do you think?
So I would say to everybody that's listening, it's very important to not sit at home or sit in an office and get out there in the field and travel as much as possible to see what's really happening. And I've always benefited from traveling extensively and getting to see what's happening on the ground. We're in a complicated world. I think you look at globalization, for all intensive purposes, we all benefit from globalization because it enables us to have the products and services that are best for the demand that's there. And also efficiency is driven by globalization. At the same time, we're having nationalistic tendencies, and we're seeing a lot of insourcing requirements. We're seeing regulations. And I think what we're moving towards is more a regionalization. And as a company and as a CEO, you have to understand how that's going to play out from the geography perspective and how you make the right investments to play locally as well as regionally. Definitely, globalization, though, is under pressure at the moment. I would hope that common sense prevails, but I think we're going to see more regionalization take place over the course of the next decade than globalization.
Yeah. And is there a particular region or country, Lorenzo, that you sit and say, gosh, if we're having this conversation in 2040, this place will really be a real player, or something different will have happened?
I look at really two areas, which number one, when you think of Southeast Asia and you include India in there, just given the population, it's bound to have a huge amount of consumption. And so when you look at it from a demand standpoint, how are they going to meet the needs of their growing population and the extensive services and products that they need? And how do we as a company act accordingly and have the local capability there? The other one is the Middle East, not necessarily from a perspective of population, but blessed with resources. And how do we as a company partner with them to be able to take those resources and give them to where the desired demand is? And they sit at a very geopolitical center point at the moment. A lot of conflicts, a lot of politics involved, but clearly there's a lot of resource there as well from an energy standpoint that is needed by the world.
Yeah, yeah, no, great answer. You were an early adopter of digital technologies and artificial intelligence. There's so much buzz and hype around AI today. Just tell me from your vantage point, how do you see kind of advanced technologies that are around, computational power, data, artificial intelligence, and How do you incorporate them into Baker Hughes strategy?
And digital has really changed the aspect of the business landscape over the course of the last decade. And I recall when you started, Jeff, the aspect of digital and also the innovation of how to use data with equipment to drive efficiencies and optimization. It is clear that the computing power, data, analytics, also with the knowledge of equipment, can drive huge efficiencies. Also, huge efficiencies from a productivity of the labor force. At the same time, as you look at generative AI and you look at all these opportunities for efficiency and productivity, there is the workforce implication as well. And so you've got to look at it from both standpoints. The benefit that it can have relative to the efficiency that you can drive in your operations and also for your customers. Then also, how do you make it something that the workforce can benefit and not actually be something that takes away work? And so we're really defining for ourselves how we make sure that it's a net positive versus it be viewed as a negative on the employee impact. And the other aspect that's obviously clear with digital is as you look at more and more aspect of digital advances and computers, cyber attacks, as you look at the risk of cyber attacks, and they're ever common now, how do you keep secure your IP? And the other developing theme is generative AI, incredible tool and an incredible opportunity. At the same time, with the ability to go on open source and be able to make a tool or a piece of equipment, what happens from a regulatory perspective on IP, what happens to the legal framework that takes place afterwards. And so as a company and as a CEO, we're looking at it from both dimensions. Clearly, though, digital is one of the key themes of the last decade, and it's going to be a key theme as we go forward to the next decade.
Yeah. Lorenzo, you're a guy that in your 20s, I knew you were going to be a CEO of something, someday, and that's turned out to be true. Uh, what's hard and what's fun about being a CEO today? The world has just changed so much. Is it still fun? And what are your biggest challenges?
I read an article yesterday, which was, from a McKinsey study, and the CEO is the loneliest job. And I think you can definitely relate to that because you've got to make it fun for yourself. It's clearly hard. I enjoy setting the purpose, setting the strategic direction of the company. I enjoy interacting with the people and the external customers, actually seeing the world and seeing how we can have a positive impact on the world at large. At the same time, the things that aren't so nice is you're dealing with a lot of bureaucracy. You're dealing with regulatory matters. You're dealing with having to sometimes have politics internally. And when you think of being a CEO, some of the key decision points are you selecting the right team around you? Can you actually align the organization with the right behaviors and the right culture? And does everybody, at the end of the day, move forward in the same direction? You do that 70% of the time, you're going to be a successful CEO. And that's the challenge is today. The world is constantly changing. And so agility, the aspect of always being open to learn, the skills that a leader needs are evolving and changing. And I think it's just going to get harder as we go forward. And it's still going to be a lonely job. So you've got to find ways to make it fun for
Make it
yourself.
fun. That's a great answer. I learned from my students at Stanford are taught that like boards are pure and they're there to protect the company from the CEO. And I say, hey, class, I hate to tell you, but I spend a fair amount of time protecting the company from the board as well. You got to keep some of that stuff in mind. Last question, Lorenzo. When you're doing employee meetings and stuff like that, and somebody asks you to define what makes a good leader, how do you answer the question? And how do you incorporate that into the way you yourself lead?
I think it's important to be true to yourself, humble, transparent, clear communicator, approachable, and at the end of the day, always have a learning desire going forward. You want to be challenged, you want to learn, and you're not scared of making decisions.
Great master class on leadership and being a CEO from Lorenzo Simonelli. Again, Lorenzo, I'm so proud of you and the great leader you've become. And thanks for the time today. And I hope to see you in person soon. So thanks, Lorenzo.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Take care.